Welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're going to take a look at finishing up doing this kind of S shape here using Inventor. But the one thing different in this video that we're going to use is going to be sheet metal. Now I don't know how many times that I've used sheet metal on my channel here, but I think this is, it's a very low number. And the other benefit of using this one in this program here is that we're going to be able to produce a flat pattern. So we're going to use sheet metal Inventor and we're going to create a flat pattern. All right, so everything on the screen here we will produce, including the flat pattern there at the top, all of the dimensions and things of that nature, and then even labeling flat patterns. So we're going to go into a little discussion about that. Some of the other things that we've done, and if you want to go back and take a look at them in other videos, is that we've also produced this using 2D, and this is a 2D drawing. You can see that I select here and I created an isometric here, and I've also done this using 3D AutoCAD, right? So if I switch over to the model tab, you will see that we did create a 3D using AutoCAD in this one. So if those are something that you're interested in, feel free to go ahead and click on those videos, and I'll try to make sure that they're linked at the end of this video. But for this one, we're going to use Inventor, right? So the normal stuff that we're going to do, and we're going to create this brand new. So we're going to create a brand new part here by selecting New. Once this dialog box appears, so we always use the standard millimeter, or it could be inches, or whatever your unit of measure here is. But in this case, we're going to be using sheet metal. So that's going to be the first major difference that we're going to do using sheet metal. So we're going to go here and we're going to create. And then we're going to give Inventor a little second to go ahead and kick over and say, hey, you want to use a sheet metal part. All right. The first thing you should notice right off the bat is that the ribbon at the top is different, right? We don't have that normal stuff that we're used to seeing. And if I just simply click on this 3D model here, that's the stuff that we're typically seeing anytime we're using just regular Inventor, right? Not the sheet metal, we're using the standard. But in the sheet metal one, we get another option. Now, we have two different ways of setting up the sheet metal, right? We have to give it a thickness, and we got two different ways of doing that. This first method is here, just going to simply select the word sheet metal defaults. And when I select this, it's going to also take me into that second option here. So I have one option here of unchecking this and telling it what the thickness that I want my material to be. And then the second option is if I select the pencil here, it should open up the style for this, and then we can go ahead and change it up into that. So let's go ahead and give it a couple of seconds, and then it should kick over. And when it does, you should see something that looks like this, right? So we have the thickness here, so I can physically change the thickness here. Back on our drawing, if you remember, that the thickness of here is going to be 5, right? We see that from this 2.5, and we're just going to wind up doubling that number. So the thickness that I'm going to use here in Inventor will be 5. And since I'm using the ISO of millimeters, it's going to assume that I'm using this in 5 millimeters. Here's one of those other neat things that you can also do in Inventor. You don't have to stay with the default units that I selected. So for example, I selected millimeters, but maybe I wanted that to be 5 inches. I can type the unit of measure behind it, and it will translate that thickness to 5 inches. But in our case, if I just leave it with no units at the end, it's going to assume whatever your default is. So I'm going to tell it that this is going to be 5, right? Once I hit the save and close and we come back to this window here, you can see that the thickness has changed, right? So this is why this is grayed out, because it's using this rule here that we have set up. Or you can always uncheck this and give it a different thickness. Either one works the same. All right, so we have our thickness set here. Let's go ahead and cancel that. Now we're going to be creating a contour flange. If I try to go right here off the bat, it's going to say, hey, you need to give me a sketch, which is typical of what Inventor is going to do. It says, hey, you need to build something before I can do that. Let's go ahead and close this, and we're going to start with just a regular sketch here, and I'm going to be creating this on the front view, right? So I'm just going to select this XY plane, should rotate around, and then we're going to start creating our part. So I'm going to start off with a couple of circles here. Let's go ahead and create one here, and I'll create one underneath it here. And I'm purposely creating these straddling the center point here. Then I'm going to tell them that these two need to be tangent to each other. So I'm just going to select these two circles here. And now they are tangent to each other. Now, before we give it any dimensions that we need to put on this, let's jump over and take a look at our AutoCAD drawing just so we can kind of define what's going to happen here. Let's see. And what's going to happen is that we need to create one of these lines. We either need to create with these top lines here, or we need to do it with the bottom lines or these outside lines / inside lines on the other side. So you can choose whichever ones you want, but make sure you choose one of them and stick with it, right? So if I'm going to choose the one that I have highlighted here on the screen, you can see that the top one has a radius of 25, and this bottom inside one has a radius of 20, right? So if you're talking in diameter terms, that's going to be 50 and 40. Or if I'm talking in terms of radius, they're just directly straightforward, right? So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to start creating this part using these dimensions. And I'm going to, once again, I am creating this using these outside ones, or the ones that I have highlighted here on screen. All right, so I'm going to go to a dimension. I'll select my circle here. And now when I'm coming out to give it my preview and place my dimension, do a right click. And then I'm just going to go to dimension type and tell it that I want to create a radius. So remember, this top one was set to 25. And then this one here at the bottom, once again, I'll right click, go to dimension type, choose radius, it's set to 20. All right, so those are my two numbers that I do need. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line just going right down the middle here. So from somewhere up here at the top, going straight down the middle of this shape. All right, let's go ahead and trim next. So I'll use the trim command. I'm just going to trim off this portion here and then this one. Let's go ahead and get rid of these lines here and here. Okay, escape out of that. Next, I want to center this shape, and I'm just going to center it using this vertical line I have here. So I'll choose the coincidence option. I'll go find the midpoint, and the midpoint on this line should be a green dot. So select that green dot, and then just select the center point. Okay. All right, so now we have that. And next, let's go ahead and draw a few more lines here. So I'm going to draw a line going straight out this direction here. So I'll draw a line from this end point going this direction here. Escape out of that and do the exact same thing here along the top. I'm going to set these two lines equal to each other. So I'll go and set them equal. Okay. And then I'll place a dimension on them, right? So I'm going to place a dimension on from here to here. And then we're going to put that at 22.5. Now, I know I'm purposely making a kind of mistake here, and we will see this when we get to another part here and see if this is indeed 22.5. But we'll check that out when we get to doing the dimensioning, and we'll see if, you know, how easy things are to edit here. Okay. Okay. And now we do have one dimension that's missing, and it looks like these center marks are not actually on this line here. So I'm just going to kind of rotate this one back a little bit. And I can either choose to put a tangent here, or I can just go ahead and affix them to this vertical line. I'll use the coincidence and select that endpoint and place it on that line. Okay. So everything is fully constrained, right? Let's go ahead and select this vertical line here, do a right click and make it a construction line. All right. So now we have everything that I need to create a contour flange, or use the contour flange command. Let's go ahead and choose the finish sketch. Next, we're going to go ahead and tell it that we want to create a contour flange. Once I select that icon there, it should automatically be able to pick my circle here. And let's take a look at this in the front, right? So you got to make sure that when you're using this dialog box here, this depends on which way you want this to flow out, right? So if I want this to go outward that direction, I can control that here. Or if I want to use the center one, I can use that one here. But in our case, we have that projected going down that way, right? Also, we have our normal stuff that you see anytime we're using any kind of extrusion. So if I turn it sideways, you'll see that this is controlling how far we want this thing to project in either direction. So I'm going to leave it symmetrical. And remember that the thickness that we have for this is set to 15, right? So that's going to be all that I need to do in order to create my contour shape. Let's go ahead and hit the OK button. And then we're going to take a look at it here in the front. All right. So we do have that S shape that we normally have. All right. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and focus on putting this radius or this kind of ball shape here. Now I can try to use the corner chamfer or corner round in this case, and you're going to see that it's going to work differently here. So if I go to corner round, it's not going to let me select these edges. It's looking for these corners here. And you can also see that in the tooltip. So if I come and I hover over this for a second, you will see it there in the picture. That's what it's going to round. If I want to do the fillet that we're talking about doing, I have to switch over to 3D modeling. Then I'll choose fillet, and I'll set this equal to 2.5. And now I'm able to select these two edges here. Let's go ahead and rotate around to the other side here at the bottom, and these two edges. Let's go ahead and flip it up and back around. Hit OK. And so now I do have this this shape here, right? Okay. Now I can already see that I did make a mistake, and that's the one that I was mentioning to you earlier, that distance from here to here is not going to measure that 2.5. Remember, that's going to the center, but we're going to find that out when we're doing the dimensioning. Okay. Next thing, here's one of the benefits about using sheet metal. Let me go back and click here. Is that I have a sheet metal part here. Wonder if I want to take a look at this as a flat pattern, right? How flat is it? Well, I can just simply select this icon here, and then you're going to see that it will give you a flat pattern, right? So it's got a flat shape here. If I want to go back to the folded model, simply I can select the icon here, and it will flip it back and forth between it. One thing also happened that when I created that flat pattern, if you look to your browser, you're going to see the word flat pattern should show up here, and I have folded model. So I can also double click on the word flat pattern here. It's going to take me back to the flat pattern, double click back on folded model, and it's going to create the folded model. All right. So now we're done with the actual creation of the model on this one. Let's start working on the 2D portion of it. So the first thing we always have to do is go ahead and save this. So I'll hit the save icon. I'm just going to save this as part number 2. So I'll go ahead and hit the save button. And then we're going to go to new. We're going to come down to the drawing, and we're going to create a standard ANSI millimeter IDW, right? Hit the create button. And we're going to give it a couple of seconds here, and it should switch over to the drafting template. All right, let's go ahead and delete our title block since we don't need it. And then we're going to right click on sheet 1. I'm going to go to edit sheet, and I'm going to make this an A size, right? So I'm going to go to A size, and then you can see the dimensions here, and we're going to make sure that it's in the landscape. So I want it to go kind of horizontal in this direction. Let's go ahead and hit OK. Now let's start creating our shape here. We're going to go ahead and put the base. And it's going to follow me around with this S shape. Now you want to make sure that up here it says part 2. And now I can choose how do I want this to appear, as the flat pattern or as the folded. Just out of default, we're going to leave it at folded right now. Let's go ahead and move this down. Then I'll go ahead and create the view here. So I'm just going to do a left click here, and then I'll come up here and put a isometric here in the corner. Right? So once I have all of those views in here, go ahead and hit the OK button. And you now see that it should create all of those views for us, right? We got all of our hidden lines and all of that other wonderful stuff that we do have going on. All right. Some other things that we can do here, we can just go right into doing our dimensioning and things of that nature, but I'm going to go ahead and put the flat pattern in here next. So use the exact same command. We're going to go to base. Once again, it's saying part number 2. I'm just going to hit flat pattern. And let me go ahead and move this up here. And you can see that this one is a different size. If we want to make it a little bit bigger, we can do that as well. Let's see what 3/4 looks like. Yes, 3/4 will give it just a little bit more bigger. and go ahead and hit the OK button. Okay, so now we have our flat pattern here at the top. We have our folded view here, and we have an isometric. Let's go ahead and start prettying this up a little bit. So I'm just going to double click on this icon here. So I'm double clicking on that dotted part here. And then I'm just going to tell it that go ahead and shade that. All right. Next, let's go ahead and putting our dimensions on this. But before we do that, the first thing I tend to like to start off with is putting my center marks on. So I'm going to click on the Annotate tab here and go ahead and put a couple of center marks. And I'm just selecting the big icons there. Now this is one thing that is different here in Inventor, is that it doesn't see an arc on this other side, so it won't put it here. You can always create that just by, let's escape out of the dimension command, coming to your center mark there and grabbing that little dot and dragging it over here to the left. All right, so let's go ahead and start putting all of our dimensions on it. Remember that my big rule is I just start dimensioning right off the bat. I don't go ahead and change my dimension style. You can change your dimension style first if that's what you want to do. And in this case, since we're so used to doing it the other way, let's go ahead and change our dimension style first, right? We're going to come up to the Manage tab, and then we're going to hit the Style Editor, right? And once again, this is one of those things about Inventor that it may take a little bit for that to load up, but it will load up here in a second. And once it does, you can see here, it's underneath the default millimeter ANSI. So this is the one I'm going to be changing. Basically, I want you to get rid of those trailing zeros, and if it does have trailing zeros, have it at 2 decimal places. So that's what's going on here. We don't have any alternate units, so there's no need to adjust here. We'll come to the display option, and underneath the display, this is all kind of normal stuff, but if we wanted to, I guess, basically change the gap in some of these settings. Next, we're going to go to text, and this is going to be the one where we're going to change how our text is orientated, right? So on our linear dimensions, we want it linear. On our diagonal dimensions, we're going to make it horizontal as well. And then on our vertical dimensions, we want those horizontal, right? All right, so everything else is going to be standard here. There's going to be no need for me to adjust the tolerancing, anything in the options, or any of my notes and arrows, right? So all of this stuff should be fine and easy to go. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the save and close. And now when I put my dimensions on, they should be automatically in the right orientation. So let's go ahead and click on Annotation, Dimensions. Remember that when you're using Inventor, the first place that you pick when you place in the dimension, that's the side it will swing your dimension to. So I'll try to remember that as I'm going through here. So I'm just going to place a dimension from here to here. You can see that that's 25. Let's go from here to here. That's my 45. I have a dimension from that line. And I forgot to put the centers on here. Let's escape out of here and put those 2 center marks that are located on this arc here. Okay. I'm going to zoom into this for a second just because I'm assuming that this is going to be wrong, and I'm pretty sure it is. But I'm going to go to a dimension, and I'm going to go from this dimension to that center mark. And you see that it gives me a number of 20. And if you remember back to AutoCAD, that number was set at 22.5, right? So, and the purpose that it didn't work, remember when we created that line, we made a line from here to here at this distance. And then we didn't account for this radius dimension that is sitting out here, that extra 2.5, right? So now we're going to account for it. So we're going to go back to our Inventor model and we're going to adjust it. We're going to add that 2.5 to it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and click on my part. Let's give it a second there. I'll go and find my contour flange here, hit the plus here, and then I'll find my sketch. I'm just going to double click on the icon in front of it. And then we're going to make this number here 25, right? So now that number is set to 25. Remember, I set these two equal to each other. Go ahead and hit the finish button. And the beauty thing about Inventor here is that once I select back or switch back to my drawing, this will automatically update for us, right? So there's no need to go back through this and go, well, I need to go ahead and delete that dimension and fix it. Let's go ahead and put some of these other dimensions on, which are quite simple, right? So we have dimensions all around this drawing. All right, and we're going to place another dimension here. And we do have an overall dimension that goes from this center to that line there. That looks like I selected the wrong part. I'm sorry about that. One more time. So from here to that point. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at our right side view here and place some dimensions on it. So I'm going to place that dimension of 15 here. I have one that goes from that line there to this line, set to 95. And then we can take a look at our flat pattern, right? So we have an overall distance here that goes out to about, 189.5 is roughly it. Let's go ahead and place a dimension that tells me where I need to go from when I bend this at. And another one here. Oh, I did have that in line with the other one. Okay. All right. And then I can place a reference dimension here if you like. Let's go ahead and place a dimension from here to here. All right. And let's go ahead and make this a reference dimension. So I'm going to double click on it. Now remember that the reason why my dimensions wasn't coming up with this box every time I was creating a dimension is because I unchecked this box here. If you have that checked, every time you make a dimension, this thing is going to come up. All right, so we don't want that box to appear every time. So I'm just going to hit the text button. Oh, I'm sorry, this is for my reference dimension. Go back to your precision and then select the word reference, hit OK, and it's going to put those marks around it just to notate it that it is a reference dimension. Let me go ahead and drag this, and then I can give it just a little bit of angle if you want to. Smooth this up a hair. And now for you putting your words underneath this, you got two options here. I'll show you the one way here, and then I'll show you the other way. But if I choose the lettering here, so I'm just going to go to text, create a little rectangle. You should get a dialog box appear, and then I can type in the word flat pattern. And you can see that I forgot to turn my caps lock on. So, flat pattern. I can highlight it, underline it. Let's give it a little bit of an extension here. Let me come back to this. That's, I think I'm clicking a little too much on it. Here we go. Let me go back into the front of this, and I'm just trying to give it some distance in between it. There you go. I like to have a little line in the front and a line in the back. And we can adjust the size of this if we need to. That's simply that in this dialog box, you can adjust it to whatever size you need it to be. So if you want it to be a little bit bigger, I need to highlight it first actually. And if I want it to be a little bit bigger, I can adjust the size from there. So this is one way of doing it. Another way you have is that you can actually edit this view, the description underneath it, right? So I can double click here. And inside of here, it tells me that, hey, what do you want to name this view? I can say, hey, name this view as flat pattern, right? Then I want you to show it by selecting this little light bulb icon. Then select the little pencil here, and it's going to bring it up in a dialog box, just kind of how we was doing our editing. And then I can also adjust it here, right? So I can go here and say, hey, get rid of the scale underneath. Now remember that when you change this, you're going to have to, the easiest way is just to bring in this view again to get all this information back. All right, I'll go ahead and hit the OK button. Let's put a space behind here and one in the front. And then when I hit the OK button, you're going to see the word flat pattern appear. And I forgot to underline this. I'm just double clicking it and I have it selected here. I'll hit the underline button and it will go ahead and create flat pattern. And you've seen the size of that one is compared to the other one, right? It was, I think, 6 point something. But you can see that either way will work, no matter which way you want to do this, right? So it's kind of up to you on how you want to create and put the word flat pattern underneath it. All right. last step I need to show you here is how to label these bins, right? And that's going to be really easy. Inventor does have a button for it. You just come here to where it says bend. Then you're going to select this line here, and you can see that it will place that bin there, and I'll select this one. Now you have the choice of leaving it looking like this, or you can drag this down. Let's go and grab this green box here, and then I can turn it that way and say, hey, that looks good. Likewise on here, I can grab the green dot, bring it down. It should flip out. Let's see if I can somewhat kind of line these up. All right. And so now you can see the benefit of this as well. You can see that I can bend this and it gives me a radius and say come up 180 degrees, and likewise with the other direction, right? Okay, so I almost forgot to show you a video or something that's in comparison to this one, right? We might want to check the length of this, and I don't expect both of these numbers here to be exactly right. So you can see that Inventor gave us a number for a flat pattern. If we didn't have Inventor, or the way we used to do it back in the days is that we would come to AutoCAD and we would basically figure that out a different way, right? And the way that we did that was we would create the shape here in 2D, and then just like I did before, by selecting these lines here to create that contour flange, or these lines that I would use to create that with, you would join these together, right? So I can select all of these and then I would join them together. You can see that they are one part. And then I would offset this, whatever the half of this is, right? So that's going to be 2.5. So let's use the offset command. Let's use 2.5. And come down to here. And then we're going to use the extend command. And I'm just going to extend this to that point, and likewise here. Okay. So now with that extended, this line here is the length, a rough estimate of the length of what you're going to get here in Inventor. Now, I don't expect these numbers to be totally the same, but we can take a look and see what that length is. And I'm just going to go to the properties real quick. And you can see here in the properties that it does give me a length. And let's go ahead and move this dialog box here. And that length is sitting at 191. And if I remember right, in Inventor, it gave me a length of 189.5. So we're in the same ballpark. We're talking about what, roughly about 2 to 3 millimeters here. So those are, ideally close numbers, but that's kind of one way that we created or figured out the length of this. Another thing here in Inventor is that I almost forgot, is that we can go ahead and put those two places and things of that nature. And it should be quite simple to do. And it's just and I can just show you on one of these, and it's the exact same concept on all of this. But if I double click here, and the dialog box should appear, I'll come to the word text. Let's go ahead and hit the enter button and then type in two places underneath it. You can see that it will give me that text, and it's giving it to me in two places. Now I have to control which justification I want that at. Meaning that, do I want that to be left justification, center justification, or I can right justify it, right? So either one of these options, or however you want your text to look, that's going to be kind of up to you. I think AutoCAD does it by center justification, but if you want it to look like that, you can do it on your videos. On your drawings. So I'll go ahead and hit the OK button. And now you can see that that's something that I can do, and that's just a matter of doing that to each one. I'm just double clicking it and adjusting the text however you want to see it done, right? Okay, so hopefully that was a little bit more informative to you. I'll go ahead and, let you play with that, and you can kind of figure out, basically what method that you like doing this in, right? So once again, that's basically what you're going to need to create a drawing like this. Hopefully this was informative to you. Please go ahead and leave me a comment, and if you like these videos, please consider subscribing to this channel if it's your first time here. If you're one of the few that keeps coming back and enjoying these videos, I want to send a special thank you. The channel is growing quite well, and keep looking at the videos, and like always, I do like reading your comments, and thank you for watching, and until the next video.